When Evan handed me the breakup fee for the 19th time, I agreed. The girl he adored was clamoring for a title and couldn't wait any longer. Neither could I. I was pregnant, and the baby wasn't his. After signing the agreement, I took a photo and sent it to Evan. It's signed. Will you have your assistant come pick it up? 20 minutes passed quietly. Evan's chat window was as silent as the grave. I was thinking if I should call for a courier when I saw Evan, slightly out of breath, standing at the door. He had actually come himself. Makes sense. His little sweetheart had been causing a commotion for half a year, wanting an official position. Seems like he was truly in a hurry. So, tell me, what new trick are you trying to pull? I've given you everything you could ask for. His tone was cold, with a hint of impatience. 3 years ago, Evan gave me a wedding. Since then, I had been his wife in name. I accompanied him from rags to riches, but in the past half year, he had been trying to figure out how to ditch me, just to make room for that little canary. He's altered the property division agreement 19 times already. I was dissatisfied with each one before. This time, I obediently signed it, and now he's suspicious. I chuckled and handed him the agreement. He suspiciously opened it, saw my signature, and his face darkened. Sherry, did you really agree? I looked at him weirdly. He always said he hated my childish jealousy the most. Now, I wasn't making a fuss, taking the money and walking away as he wished, but he seemed even more displeased. Don't tell me he wants to see me in tears, begging him to stay. I smiled. Isn't this good? You can openly marry Bella now, and I can start planning my life. This time, the agreement included house, car, company shares, everything. He spared no expense. I accepted it all. After all, I had been the one by his side all these years when he was a nobody. Who would willingly let their efforts benefit others? Now, it's good. With everything I've earned over the years, plus what he's giving me, even if I start traveling the world from tomorrow, I have enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Love might be gone, but at least I have a lot of money. Evan heard my words and his look became complicated, as if he had something to say but refrained. Just then, a soft, sweet voice interrupted us. Sherry, thank you for letting us be together. It was Bella, the little canary Evan held dear. She was a phoenix emerging from the mountains. Ordinary education. It wasn't easy for her to get into the fiercely competitive Galaxy group, yet she managed it in just 3 months, becoming Evan's secretary in the CEO's office. She worked really hard at seducing Evan. Evan said she was pure and kind, always afraid I would bully her. But what kind of pure and kind person would sleep with a married man and send photos to his wife? I couldn't accept it before. I cried hard, made a fuss. I even exposed them online out of anger. The next day, not a trace was left. Evan's methods were always neat and thorough. The funny thing is, eventually, he used those same methods on me. After all the trouble, I am tired. I looked at the two of them with a faint smile, not bothering to say more. You've got the agreement, aren't you leaving? I issued an eviction order. The villa was under my name. Since Evan started frequently seeing his lover, he barely returned here. If they stayed any longer, I would want to disinfect the whole house. Evan's face darkened. Sherry, playing hard to get won't work on me. Since you dare to sign, don't regret it. With that, he pulled Bella and walked out. Wait, I called out to Evan. He turned back, showing an expected expression. He probably thought I couldn't bear to let him go, but I just reminded him, don't forget to transfer the money, and transfer the property to my name soon. His expression blanked for a second, and then he gritted his teeth. You are in a hurry. In a hurry, of course. I was in a hurry. I was pregnant, not his. The longer I delayed ending things with him, the worse it would turn out. I had an appointment for a prenatal checkup. Unexpectedly, I ran into Evan and Bella at the hospital. He was carefully holding her hand. Bella was chattering, and he was patiently listening, his gaze affectionate. They were so close. There seemed to be no room for a third person. Memories surged. A long time ago, he treasured me like that too. It had been so long. The last time he looked at me that way was when I had a miscarriage. I was 4 months pregnant. He had his first affair. She was a fearless girl. She stormed in, demanding I make room for her. I called her shameless, and she said the unloving one is the mistress. Her pride was hurt, and she pushed me hard, making me lose the child. Covered in blood, I was taken into the operating room. Upon waking up, the first thing I saw was Evan's remorseful face. His eyes were full of guilt, gripping my hand tightly, sobbing. I'm sorry, Sherry. I'm a bastard. Hit me, please. I'm sorry. I slapped him hard. He didn't dodge, just took it. When I got tired of hitting him, he reluctantly said, just this once, Sherry. Give me a chance to make it up to you, okay? We will have children again. He sent that girl away, becoming a considerate lover once more. But it only lasted half a year. After half a year, there were new girls around him again. One youthful face after another. Before I could remember them, they were replaced. Bella had been by his side the longest. Running into them at the obstetrics and gynecology department was indeed awkward. I turned to leave. Who would have thought Bella's voice would stop me? Sherry, fancy seeing you here. She was hanging on to Evan like a big ornament. Her cheeks were flushed, looking kind of shy. I'm pregnant, here to see the doctor. I watched her act without any expression. Evan saw the registration slip in my hand and frowned. What are you seeing the doctor for? I gave a cold smile. Mr. Evan, it's best not to be too curious about your ex-wife's privacy in front of your new lover. He seemed a bit annoyed and actually pushed Bella aside, grabbing my wrist. Sherry, I am your man. You suddenly show up at the gynecology department. I have the right to know. I stared at him, unable to hide the mockery in my tone. My man, Mr. Evan, are you sure? Although we had a wedding. In the marriage registration system, I have always been single. Evan hesitated for a moment, as if he suddenly remembered something, his eyes growing darker. Yes, that wedding was so romantic and grand back then. In the eyes of outsiders, I was his only wife. Especially over the years, our businesses and equity distribution were intertwined. But who knew? We had never actually gone to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Whenever I urged Evan to get the certificate with me, he was either going to a meeting or traveling abroad. His time was always so precious that he couldn't spare half an hour in 3 years to get a marriage certificate with me. Yet, when we broke up, we fought over money and power distribution, making a scene known to everyone. My wrist hurt from his grip, but he wouldn't let go. Luckily, shortly after, the number caller announced my name. Patient Sherry, please proceed to diagnosis room number 5. Only then did Evan reluctantly release my hand. I immediately walked past him and Bella, into the diagnosis room, and locked the door. I didn't care at all about Evan's extremely dark expression. The doctor carefully reviewed my test reports and gave a few instructions, also told me to bring the child's father next time. He's dead. This statement struck like a thunderbolt. The doctor, who was focused on writing prescriptions, quickly lifted his head, eyes flooded with sympathy. He changed to a consoling tone, telling me to take care and to mourn appropriately. I cooperated and put on a sorrowful expression. Maybe because it was early in pregnancy, I felt a bit drowsy. After returning from the hospital, I kept sleeping. In a daze, I had many dreams. At first, it was me just graduating college, and Evan's family going bankrupt, leaving him homeless. We squeezed into a small rented apartment, where he held me, wrapping me in his puffer jacket, resting against his chest. Sherry, when I have money, I won't let you suffer anymore. I'll hire at least 5 people, 1 to cook for you, 1 to wash clothes, 1 to fold blankets. From the sounds of his booming heartbeat, my face turned red from his sweet talk, naively believing that love could conquer all. Later, he really made a comeback, achieving fame and success. But more people started showing up around him. Those people came and went, just like Evan's elusive love. In the final dream, it was a mess everywhere, broken pieces of porcelain at my feet, bleeding as I cried and broke down. He watched me go mad, unmoved, speaking indifferently. Sherry, you look so ugly doing this. At that moment, I looked at him. The person I deeply loved during those youthful years suddenly seemed rotten. When I woke up, the sky was already getting dark. I groggily got up. A sudden voice startled me. I heard, "You're carrying my child, and going around spreading rumors that I'm dead." I jolted, turning towards the voice. Standing by the window, a man was looking at me, moonlight casting a silver glow over his dark suit. The room was unlit. Hidden in the dark, he'd be hard to notice if he didn't speak. "Jack, did you want to scare someone to death? You're too much." Jack laughed, amused by my words. He walked to the bed and pulled me into his arms. Warm body heat seeped through my thin nightgown, as his hand gently stroked my lower back. When he spoke again, his tone was filled with helplessness. "Who's really been too much here, Sherry? First, you sleep with me and run away. Now you want to run off with my child, too." Jack guessed right. My plan was to have the child and settle in a small town, far from Evan, and far from Jack. After all, the start of our relationship wasn't exactly clean. That was 3 months ago, on my birthday. Evan suggested spending the last birthday together before we split, for good luck and a clean break. He had made an early reservation at a restaurant. The window seat offered a full view of the night scenery. He came to pick me up as if nothing had ever changed between us. He presented a cake to me and lit the candles himself. "Make a wish." At his urging, I closed my eyes with mixed feelings and silently said, "My wish is..." It took maybe 10 seconds. When I opened my eyes again, the seat across from me was empty, leaving me bewildered. Evan had disappeared. I waited for quite a while, but he didn't come back. Finally, a server informed me, Mr. Evan received a phone call and left. He said to tell you to finish your meal and leave. He'd cover all the expenses. I watched the candles burn out on the cake, the frosting collapsing bit by bit. The happy birthday words turned into ugly red blotches. Eventually, I laughed mockingly. After leaving the restaurant, I took a taxi to the harbor. When we were poor and couldn't afford to travel, Evan often brought me to the harbor. He always said, if you can't see new places, at least enjoy the sea breeze. Later, the sea remained the same, but the person had long changed. I wandered aimlessly for a long time, until someone nearby suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God, this is so romantic." Following their gaze, I saw the night sky over the sea, countless drones sparkling, forming romantic cursive words. "Bella, I love you." Seconds later, countless fireworks bloomed in the night sky. Brilliant, beautiful. People around me sighed. Wow, which rich heir is confessing his love now? Ah, it's just another day among us ordinary folks. I practically opened Twitter in a self-destructive manner. Sure enough, I saw Bella's bragging post. True love is, no matter what time it is, as long as I say I miss him, he'll give me a confession. The picture was of the drone confession. When a person's heart is completely broken, they might become as crazy as a madman. I bought a lot of alcohol to drink. There were too many people by the sea. Evan and Bella were together, surrounded by oblivious passers-by, and they didn't notice me at all. But I watched them for a long, long time, until I realized I was surrounded by empty bottles, and my vision started to blur. I knew it was bad to continue drinking, so I got up and staggered away. It was tough getting away from the noisy port. As I walked along the road, I bumped into someone. Careful, he held my hand to steady me. I straightened up and saw who it was. Jack, a big shot on Wall Street, heir to the Lake Group. These years, due to business investments, I've had some dealings with him. You could say 2/3 of my wealth came from the shelter of his big tree. He's the complete opposite of Evan. There are hardly any women around him. People in the circle joke if he's gay. He never denies it. Sherry, he held me up, frowning. Why did you drink so much? He smelled nice, very clean. Unlike Evan, who always smelled of Bella's perfume. Jack, they say you like men. Is that true? I asked out of nowhere. My tongue felt numb. It must be the alcohol. Jack was stunned at first, then sighed helplessly, carefully placing me into his Rolls Royce. Maybe he just looked very pleasing to me. Maybe the alcohol dulled my reason. Or maybe I was just trying to get back at Evan. I quietly leaned closer to Jack and kissed his cheek. He turned, looking at me shocked. For a moment, his pupils shook. His pale skin turned slightly pink with heat. The next second, I brazenly straddled him. Jack, do you want to try with me? I was so close, my lips brushed his earlobe. It felt soft, so I kissed it. His ear felt slightly hot. He spoke above me, his voice a bit hoarse. Sherry, get a grip. I laughed. I'm sober. I know you guys like young and pretty women. You can always dump a woman when you're tired of her. Feeling hot, I instinctively wanted to move closer to someplace cool. He frowned, eyes dark and unclear. I leaned back to kiss him again. This time, he didn't avoid it. His lips were cool, with a fresh mint scent. Very nice. I kissed him breathlessly, almost to the point of suffocating. He held my head with one hand, my waist with the other, forcing me to continue. The car's partition conveniently rose, completely sealing us in a private space. He finally let go of me, his voice huskier than before. Sherry, I don't like men, and I don't like young ones. His reaction was so slow. We already kissed. Why say this now? I wasn't drunk to the point of forgetting everything, but my head was fuzzy. Before I could think clearly, Jack started the car. Soon, we reached the destination. Jack lifted me from the back seat. He carried me through the villa's living room, quickly upstairs into the bedroom, and placed me carefully on the bed. Standing above me, he looked down. My eyes were fixed on his lips, the lips I just kissed, moist with steam, slightly swollen and red. I glanced down, the top 2 buttons of his shirt unbuttoned, collarbones exposed to the air. He looked like a seductive male siren. He curved his lips, guiding my hand under his shirt. Sherry, do you want it? Yes. Satisfied with my answer, Jack leaned down to kiss my lips. Different from the previous 2 times, this kiss was deep, intense, as if trying to vent his strong possessiveness. His burning kisses moved down. Sherry, do you like it? My face felt like it could cook. I could only cling tightly to Jack. At first, I bit my lips hard to avoid answering, but eventually, I succumbed to Jack's assault. I buried my face in his neck, whimpering. Yes, I like it. He kissed me with satisfaction. Finally, I fell into a deep sleep in his embrace. When I woke up the next day, he was already gone. I understood what that meant. He must be someone who avoids trouble. Good, I avoid it too. Since he left, I decided to act as if nothing happened. That would be good for both of us. So I slipped away, blacklisting him to keep it clean and avoid awkwardness. As for business, I let my subordinates handle it, strictly professional. Since then, I haven't seen Jack, until a few days ago, when I realized my period was late. Only then did I remember. I hadn't taken any contraceptives after that night. I secretly bought a pregnancy test. Did 5 tests in a row, all positive. I was baffled. After my previous miscarriage, the doctor said it would be hard to conceive again. So much for difficult. How did Jack hit the mark on the first try? I was confused. Logically, Jack had the right to know, but I recalled his attitude that day. I wasn't sure. Just in case. I didn't mention a word, planning to break up with Evan quickly and secure a future for me and the baby. Unfortunately, before I could, Jack found me. Sherry, why did you block me? His lips close to my ear, his voice cool, warm breath spilling from his mouth. You didn't regret sleeping with me, did you? His attitude left me stunned. I didn't expect him to care so much about me blocking him. To avoid more misunderstandings, I decided to make things clear. Jack, we're all adults here. I initiated that night, so I understand and accept the consequences. You found out about the hospital, so you should know I'm definitely keeping the baby. I have money. I can take care of the child myself without troubling you. If you're really worried, we can sign a confidentiality agreement. Jack suddenly froze while kissing my earlobe. His voice dropped even lower. You're going to do it alone. What if the kid asks about their dad? And what if they want to see a picture of him? I had already thought through this. I'll tell the kid their dad is dead. We can use AI to create photos. As for the cause of death, let's say it was a car accident. If you're not happy with that, you can come up with a more dignified death for yourself. Of course, if you want to see the kid later, that's fine. He can call you uncle. Jack frowned at first, but then he laughed angrily. Call me uncle. Sherry, what the hell do you take me for? I was stunned and couldn't quite grasp his meaning. Hadn't I even thought out the future for him, and he still wasn't satisfied? Jack, I just don't want to trouble you too much. After all, you left pretty decisively that day. As I spoke, I watched Jack's facial expression and considered other possibilities. Could he have found out I was pregnant and changed his mind, wanting to fight for custody? Jack took several deep breaths before speaking again, a little helplessly. I never thought you were a trouble. I was slightly taken aback. I had another absurd guess creeping into my mind. Jack stared at me seriously, explaining, that day, there was a problem with my project's French division. I had to personally go sort it out. I left you a note, asking you to wait for me to come back. So, you didn't see anything. A note? I really didn't see anything. Why would he write a note in this high-tech age? Besides, I was too embarrassed to stay, and just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Who had the mood to check for notes? Jack continued, clearly upset. When I tried to contact you later, I found out you had blocked me on all channels. Sherry, do you see me as someone that's shameful? I gave an awkward laugh. That's a bit much. But we can't possibly get married just because we slept together once, right? He looked down and asked, why not? I widened my eyes, almost in disbelief. Are you serious? Jack, do you really like kids that much? Jack's gaze was incredibly deep, and he looked at me for a long time, before lazily replying in a low voice. Let's just say I like kids. Of course, I didn't agree to marry Jack. It was too crazy. I'd gone from loving Evan deeply to being fed up with him. Our long entanglement hadn't ended well. I wasn't about to jump hastily into another relationship trap. Jack didn't push. He just watched me re-add his contact info. He also insisted that I inform him before my next prenatal checkup. I frowned. Is that really necessary? I don't know if it was my imagination, but I thought I sensed a gritted teeth tone in his smile. Didn't you say I like kids? If I like kids, how could I let you go for a prenatal checkup alone? All right then. I respected his rights as the biological father. Besides, he was a moneymaker in my business. I had to show at least some respect. After that, Jack started caring about my diet and clothing, and even bought baby supplies. Once, he went on a business trip to Europe and personally brought back a custom-made crib by a master craftsman. The crib was filled with various diapers, formulas, and baby creams. He seemed genuinely excited about the baby's arrival. Over time, I got used to this, until, half a month later, at an auction, Jack and I were entering together when we saw Evan. Bella was clinging to Evan with a smug look. Long time no see, but Evan froze when he saw me with Jack. He opened his mouth, seeming like he wanted to say something to me, but Bella didn't give him the chance. Honey, I'm a bit tired. Can you take me over there to sit? As they were leaving, she turned and gave me a mocking look. I ignored it. Being pregnant, I needed to stay away from such toxic people. The auction items were pretty average, and I wasn't that interested, until I saw a necklace. It was a beautiful piece I had liked for many years, but never managed to buy. Starting bid was 800,000. I raised my paddle first. Bella wasn't far behind, continuously outbidding me. 1 million, 1.5 million. In the end, it was Evan who raised the paddle. 3 million. He knew I wanted that necklace for a long time. Still, he wanted to snatch it from me, just to give it to Bella. Sneaking a glance in their direction, I locked eyes with Bella's smug face. I knew Bella might not even like it that much. She just didn't want me to have it. 3 million, first call. 3 million, second call. I didn't raise my paddle again. Jack squeezed my hand, wanting to raise the price. 500, before he could finish. I quickly grabbed his hand to stop him. 5 what 5? Are you crazy? He looked a bit innocent. 5 million isn't expensive. You really like the necklace, don't you? I scoffed. How is it not expensive? You've never been poor, that's why. Only those who have truly been poor know that 5 million is insanely expensive. When you're down and out, let alone 5 million, you might fight for just 500 bucks. But I'm afraid Jack, who has never needed to worry about money, wouldn't understand that kind of logic. I shook my head. Don't bother. I don't like losing money. Evan's 3 million far exceeds the necklace's actual value. If he wants to be a sucker, let him. After all, the property division agreement has long been signed by Evan. Now, any money he spends is from his own share. 3 million isn't much, but bit by bit, it adds up. I'd be thrilled if he keeps spending himself into poverty. 3 million, third call. Sold. The auction gavel fell, settling everything. After the event, people began to leave in a stream. Bella deliberately walked over to me, immediately flaunting. Sherry, are you upset? It's all Evan's fault. He saw I liked it and didn't hesitate. I can lend it to you if you want to see it. Evan stood beside her, silently watching the scene unfold. Indeed, he spoiled Bella, letting her flaunt in front of me time and time again. I smirked. No need. I don't like it that much. If you like it, keep it. Surely, anything you look at can't be that good. I shot a meaningful glance at Evan beside her. Evan's face visibly darkened, irritated. Sherry, what's happened to you? It's just a necklace. Do you really need to be so harsh about it? It's no big deal. I'll buy you another one. I raised my eyes, then stared at him steadily. No need. Like you said, it's just a necklace. I don't lack. Evan seemed choked, then it finally dawned on him. I was a jewelry designer. His company's first fortune came from me selling my design rights, fetching him his first million. Back then, he held me with red eyes, promising to buy me lots of jewelry one day. In the end, he only gave me an ordinary ring. I was his girlfriend for 4 years and Mrs. Evan for 3 years. He tricked 7 of my most precious years with a tiny diamond. A promise is sincere at the moment it's made, but sincerity changes quickly. Love, at its end, distances itself by mountains and roads, all dependent on conscience. Now, he has his company, and I have my career. My jewelry brand is renowned worldwide. Anything I like, I can buy myself. I don't need him anymore. Seeming to remember the past, Evan looked a bit dazed. When he looked back at me, his eyes were filled with guilt and nostalgia. At that moment, Jack's tall figure suddenly stepped in, completely blocking out Evan's gaze towards me. In a lazy yet utterly mocking voice, he said, Mr. Evan, it's been years, and your taste has changed. You like this kind of girl now. Saying that, Jack threw a casual glance at Bella. Bella barely held back her rage, but her entire facial expression was contorted with anger. I couldn't care less about looking anymore. Jack, let's go. My calling his name in public seemed to please Jack. He bent his lips into a smile. I thought that would be the end of it, and would get some peace. Who could have known that Evan would suddenly regret everything? I have a habit of silencing my phone when I sleep. That day, when I woke up, my screen showed over 30 missed calls and 99 messages, all from Evan. Sherry, let's talk. I'm coming over. Nobody's home. Where are you? What were you checking at the OBGYN last time? Are you pregnant? If you're pregnant, I won't agree to the divorce. If you don't answer, I'll wait outside your door. Sherry, why weren't you home all night? Why did you dismiss the servants? Because I moved out a long time ago. Living in a house with traces of him made me uneasy, so I sold it. After Jack found out, as a dad, he kindly offered a private island villa and hired personal doctors and caregivers. The island has a beautiful environment and a perfect climate, ideal for a peaceful pregnancy. I didn't refuse. Anyone would be foolish to turn down such an offer. Since Jack wanted to enjoy his rights as a father, he naturally had to be willing to spend. It's called fair trade. Jack and I had grown to understand this unspoken rule. As for Evan, according to the agreement, there's still a good amount of property he hasn't transferred over to me. Now he wants to backtrack. Not a chance. I immediately called him back. Evan's voice came through tired and slightly hoarse. Sherry, I asked the former servants. They said they noticed you taking pregnancy-related medication. If it's true, then maybe we shouldn't split up. I suddenly lost my patience. When you're down on your luck, even taking a pill gets monitored by nosy servants. Fortunately, I always knew you can't hide the truth forever, so I was mentally prepared. Before Evan could finish, I cut him off blandly. Yes, I'm pregnant, but Evan, who said the child is yours? The other end of the phone was silent for a really long time. I could almost hear the sound of Evan's quick breaths. After a while, he finally coldly retorted, Sherry, what do you mean? When Evan finally found me, I was playing with Egg Yolk. Egg Yolk is a little yellow dog Jack adopted for me so I wouldn't get bored. He's gentle and affectionate, loves to lie by my feet and soak up the sun. Evan saw me and was stunned. So you really are here? If I'm not mistaken, this property should be under the He family name. He stared at my belly like he wanted to burn a hole through me. When exactly? I tilted my head and smiled, telling him, remember my birthday, the night you left halfway to confess to Bella with that drone. Evan's eyes widened, staring at me in disbelief. Finally, he stammered, Sherry, we hadn't even broken up, and you were already cheating on me. To him, it was like I had done something wrong, like I was the one to be blamed. I couldn't help but laugh mockingly and shot back. And all these years, as you kept changing lovers, and when you got Bella pregnant, did you ever think of me? Knowing he couldn't justify himself, he stood there for a long time before reluctantly saying, Sherry, abort the child. Let's not fight anymore. We'll go to the registry office and get married. Let's have a good life together, okay? I laughed out loud, staring at him without blinking. Abort? You think that's even possible? I had a miscarriage before. The doctors said it would be hard for me to have children again. Do you remember why I had that miscarriage? What right do you have to decide the fate of my child? He staggered, pain flashing in his eyes. Fine, then have the baby. When you're better, we'll have our own child, okay? I felt like it was the funniest joke I'd ever heard. I couldn't help but look at him like he was crazy. Do you even hear yourself? His eyes were red as he made one last attempt. Sherry, for you, I'll accept this child. At that moment, a low chuckle came from not far away. It was Jack. He loosened the top button of his shirt and spoke lazily yet mockingly. Want my child to call you dad? Are you worthy? The atmosphere tensed immediately. The moment Evan saw Jack, it was like he had been provoked, charging at him furiously. Jack, it's you. Unfortunately, he didn't manage to lay a finger on Jack before the villa's bodyguards stopped him. He probably forgot whose house this was. Evan's eyes were bloodshot, trying to break free from the bodyguards to fight Jack. But reality was harsh. With a flick of the guard's wrist, he was pathetically thrown to the floor. And Jack just sat on the sofa, legs crossed, looking at him expressionlessly, his face as cold as frost. Are you leaving on your own? Or do I have to have you thrown out? I was a bit surprised. Even though Jack was dignified, he was known for his composure. Even when facing business rivals, he'd never lost his cool like this. It was the first time I'd seen him so angry. And since Evan came alone, there was nothing he could do no matter how unwilling he was. Looking defeated, he stumbled to his feet and handed me a box. I didn't open it. The blue velvet box. I could guess what it was. It was that necklace Bella had taken, the one I had wanted for a long time. He lowered his head and said to me, Sherry, on the day of the auction, I didn't really want to take away what you liked. I just wanted to make you jealous, to make you give in a little. I've gotten the necklace back for you. I'll make Bella get rid of the child. Don't you still like this necklace? Can we get back together, please? Yes, I used to like it so much. He knew that, but he still helped Bella use it to slap me in the face. He also knew every time I cried and argued, it tore me apart. But he kept hurting me again and again. I said softly, I don't like it anymore. Neither the necklace nor you. Evan's face turned white. Sherry, don't be stubborn, okay? You really willing to leave me? It was so ironic. Back then, he was the one who hurt me the most. And now, he acts like he's the victim. I looked at his slightly reddened eyes, pulled my clothes from his grasp, and said seriously, Evan, you destroyed everything with your own hands. If we're breaking up, let's do it completely. don't make me look down on you. 3 days later, Evan and I completed the final property settlement at the notary office. Evan looked exceptionally haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, clearly not having slept well. But now, his well-being had nothing to do with me anymore. As we parted ways, he seemed to have something to say to me. But before he could, Bella suddenly appeared. Her usual gentle facade was gone, replaced with anger and resentment. Evan, she already has someone else's child. Why give her so much? I thought it was just a breakup payment. How could you even transfer that 80 million villa to her? Did you even think about me and our baby? I frowned a little. Bella might not know that what Evan gave me wasn't just a breakup payment. Every deal he made, every penny he earned, had my share in it. Without me, he wouldn't have what he has today. I just got what I deserved. Besides, Bella was being too impatient. Evan, this guy, love comes in strong waves, but fades quickly. Her image of being a gentle wife broke down too fast, which isn't good at all. Sherry, don't even think about taking advantage. Bella screamed at me, rushing towards me without hesitation. Enough, Evan shouted loudly, stopping her. Have you had enough? Stop embarrassing yourself here. Bella's body stiffened from the yell, her eyes turning red in an instant. She threw a fake handbag viciously at Evan. Embarrassing? How can you yell at me? You broke up with her, didn't you? Why are you still protecting her? More and more onlookers gathered around. Evan's expression grew more and more annoyed, finally erupting. Even if I don't marry Sherry, I'll never marry you. Bella was stunned by the yell. The next second, she realized what had happened and chased after him in a panic, trying to grab Evan's hand. But Evan looked indifferent, pushing her away forcefully. Stay away from me. That's when the accident happened. Bella always loved dressing up. Even after getting pregnant, she still insisted on wearing delicate sheepskin high heels. She liked to use those to show Evan's love for her. As a result, Evan's shove made her lose her footing, and she tumbled down the steps several times. She landed on the ground, covering her stomach with a pale face, crying out in pain for help. My baby, Evan, my stomach hurts so much. Seeing this, Evan panicked too, looking extremely unpleasant. About 4 or 5 seconds later, blood started trailing down Bella's legs. My heart trembled at the sight. Before, our child, Evan and I, was lost the same way. Is it fate? For someone unfaithful and unloving, even family ties are destined to be shallow. Or perhaps, the baby senses that its father doesn't love it while in the mother's womb. So, it leaves in sadness. Even though the human world is nice, it chooses not to come again. Because of Bella's scene, word about Jack and me eventually got out to the family. The next day, Jack's grandfather ordered him to return to the old house. He specifically mentioned wanting to see me. On the car ride, I couldn't help but feel nervous. Jack reassured me, telling me his grandpa is easy to talk to. I believed him, but from the moment we walked in, the old man's brows never relaxed. Though he was 80 and needed a cane to walk, his face held authority, and he had a natural aura of superiority. Squinting his eyes, he commanded in an unquestionable tone, "Kneel." His authoritative voice echoed throughout the entire hall. Jack didn't hesitate for a second, taking off his suit jacket and kneeling straight away. I trembled following behind him. Do I also have to kneel? My head filled with questions. Then Jack's grandpa spotted me, and his attitude did a complete 180-degree. Smiling kindly, he walked towards me. Girl, don't be nervous. Sit down. Grandpa isn't a bad person. Grandpa just wants to help teach that naughty grandson of mine a lesson. You watch from the sofa. I was completely stunned as Jack's housekeeper mom helped me sit down. When my eyes met Jack's, he slightly smiled, signaling me not to mind. It seemed he was used to kneeling. He could handle it, right? But no, I overestimated him, because the next second, he said, Grandpa, Sherry is sitting, so I shouldn't have to kneel, right? It would have been better if he said nothing. Jack's grandpa exploded right away. In an instant, he picked up the cane and struck his back without mercy. You brat, how dare you sass me? Have you forgotten the family rules? So many matches were arranged for you, but you refused all of them. And now, you've compromised a decent girl. Disgraceful. As he scolded, the old man swung the cane even harder. I was shocked by the scene. What era is this? They still use family rules. Jack, who is a dominating figure outside, obediently knelt and got beaten at home. I tried to plead. Jack's grandpa, actually, it's not Jack's fault. I was drunk and Before I could finish, Jack's grandpa interrupted. Don't plead for him. You were drunk, but what about him? If he didn't have bad thoughts, could this have happened? It's clearly this brat taking advantage of you. Watch me teach him a lesson. Jack's grandpa meant business while beating. Seeing 10 strokes in, Jack's white shirt already showed hints of blood. I quickly stepped in to stop the cane. No more beating. Jack's grandpa wasn't willing, trying to wrestle the cane back. In the tussle, Jack suddenly stood up from his obedient kneel, shielding me behind him. Grandpa, you can beat me, but don't push Sherry. She's pregnant. Jack's grandpa's hand froze in midair upon hearing this. After a few moments of confusion, a gleam of joy shone in his eyes. Pregnant? Are you saying I'm going to have a great-grandchild? Jack hesitated. You called me back for a beating yet didn't know she's pregnant. Jack's grandpa shook his head in puzzlement. So, he only had a vague idea and didn't know I was already carrying Jack's child. I came to Jack's home, this time fully prepared to discuss the custody of the child. Who would have thought the old man, after hearing the whole story, would directly ask me when I was going to marry Jack? Old man, aren't you changing your stance too quickly? I had to explain. Sorry, Jack's grandpa, I don't have any plans to get married at the moment. Jack's grandpa went silent for a moment, then looked at Jack with an expression of disappointment. You little rascal, what are you doing? Why haven't you even chased your wife yet? He said this without avoiding me at all. I awkwardly turned my head away, but then I heard Jack's amused voice beside my ear. Yeah, I guess I'm too dumb, but I'm already trying. I'll work harder. That night, Jack's grandpa arranged for us to stay in the old house. He even purposely mentioned that there weren't enough rooms and pushed us into sharing a bedroom. The old man's intentions were clear. The bedroom had a black and white minimalist decor. It was obviously Jack's private room. Jack took off his blood-stained shirt and asked me to help him apply some ointment. His skin was very fair, making the bruises and wounds stand out even more. I took the ointment and carefully applied it, brushing my fingertips against the skin of his back. His body temperature was a little hot. Jack suddenly spoke, his voice hoarse. Grandpa is always hoping I'll get married. He's a bit overenthusiastic. Don't take it to heart. I softly mumbled in understanding. Old folks always long for a house full of children and grandchildren. After applying the ointment, I let out a long breath. I casually glanced around the room. Suddenly, a pair of cufflinks on the cabinet caught my eye. Why do they look so familiar? As if possessed, I walked over, picked them up, and was shockingly surprised. Jack, how did you get these cufflinks? Jack's gaze fell on the cufflinks and then shifted to my face. After a few seconds of silence, he lowered his eyelashes slightly. You gave them to me. I looked at him incredulously. How's that possible? I sold these cufflinks 8 years ago. Jack held the cufflinks, took a deep breath, and seemed to have steeled himself mentally before explaining. 8 years ago, a girl selling stuff near the university gate pushed them on me. These cufflinks had 6 blue and white diamonds, finely crafted, not worse than high-end brands, but she sold them to me for only $800. She said she designed them herself. They weren't branded, so they weren't worth much. She sold them to save up money to buy her boyfriend a new phone. Jack looked up and smiled self-deprecatingly. Back then, I thought she was pretty, just a bit silly. During that time, I often walked through that street and always saw her at her store. If she hadn't had a boyfriend, I would have certainly chased her. Later on, she graduated and I went abroad. I thought we'd never cross paths again, but a few years later, her work showed up at an international jewelry auction, and later, she brought her jewelry brand directly to me. Seeing her walk towards me step by step, my heart fluttered again. All these years, my upbringing kept reminding me that she was taken. I should never disturb her. Until that night, when she stumbled into my arms. The night closed in. The room was dimly lit with a soft yellow glow. Breezes came through the old house's window screens, bringing a gentle coolness. Jack's voice grew softer. That night, you kissed me first. Sherry, how could I ever let go after that? I was stunned listening to all this. Jack was already holding my face, kissing me deeply. Later, I gave birth to a sweet, adorable daughter. Jack always stayed by my side, but I never agreed to his proposals. Not for any special reason. I just didn't want to be tied down by a relationship again. Only those who have been in a cage know the value of freedom. Plus, liking someone and marriage are not the same thing. I didn't dare easily get involved again. My daughter took my surname and was named Zoe. I accompanied Zoe from her babbling first words to her first day at school. Unwittingly, another 7 years had passed. People talked about Jack, saying he transformed from a young and handsome gay guy to the current golden bachelor. Jack would always clarify publicly, I'm not gay, and I'm not single. I have a girlfriend. I also have a daughter. My daughter is really beautiful. Jack's grandpa, still tough as nails, would often grumble sarcastically. Yes, you have a girlfriend, you also have a daughter, but you don't have a wife, and your daughter calls you uncle. Zoe always knew Jack was her dad, but she stuck to me too much. When Jack came over, he would insist on sleeping with me, being clingier than a child, so Zoe would get coaxed away by her grandma. That's why she would pointedly call him Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack, feeling wronged by his daughter, would pitifully come to me at night. He'd hold and kiss me repeatedly, his tone full of grievance. Sherry, you heartless woman, when will you finally give me a proper title? He had his arm around my waist, and I lazily poked at his abs. Depends on your performance tonight, and my mood tomorrow. Jack grumbled that I always gave him empty promises. The next second, he buried his head and kissed me even more passionately and fiercely. Later, I heard from a friend that Evan was dead. After Bella lost the baby, she clung to Evan and wouldn't let go. She threatened to marry him, demanding he take care of her for the rest of her life. Evan had long grown tired of her and refused to comply, even trying to fire her from the company. Desperate, Bella fought back by leaking company secrets to a rival and exposing various financial issues. Evan was overwhelmed by her actions, losing several big deals and ultimately seeing his company go bankrupt. He came to despise Bella, and in one of their heated arguments, he accidentally pushed her down the stairs. Feeling hopeless, Evan followed her and jumped too. I merely nodded and said, "Is that so?" with no emotion in my heart. After all these years, hearing Evan's name felt like a distant memory. My friend sighed. Back in school, you two were so good together. I still remember how Evan would bring you food and tutor you every day. He couldn't be without you. The whole girls' dorm knew how much he loved you. How did such a good person end up so miserably? I listened quietly, like hearing about a stranger. Mom, come play. Not far away, my daughter was calling for me. Jack was playing frisbee with our daughter and the dog. I hurriedly ended the call and took the frisbee from my daughter, throwing it far. The dog ran freely, and my daughter laughed happily. Jack looked over at me. In that glance, his eyes were gentle. The years were kind. Evan's epilogue. After the breakup, Evan secretly went to see Sherry 3 times. The first time was at the hospital. He was deeply troubled by Bella's harassment. Long-term smoking and drinking had taken a toll on his health. A stomach problem landed him in the hospital. In unbearable pain, Evan would instinctively think of Sherry. In the past, if he even slightly frowned after a drinking session, Sherry would worry if he was unwell. If he threw up, she would be even more distressed. He always thought that someone who loved him so much like Sherry would never leave him. But now, with a bleeding stomach and excruciating pain, even hearing her voice was a luxury. Sherry had long deleted him from her Instagram. Luckily, old messages were still there. He obsessively listened to her old voice messages. "Honey, come pick me up after work. By the way, find some time this year to take me to Iceland to see the Northern Lights. Okay. Evan, Mr. Evan, happy birthday. No working late tonight. And don't make fun of my ugly cake." Her voice seemed so close to his ears. Playful, sweet, angry. He purposely ignored the later arguing and her tearful questioning if he still loved her. It was only after losing her that he realized he wasn't tired of Sherry, but Sherry had already become a part of his very being, like oxygen, seemingly unnoticed but essential. Later, by a twist of fate, he saw Sherry again at the obstetrics department of the same hospital. Sherry was there for a checkup. Jack was with her the whole time, this well-dressed man attending to a pregnant woman, personally running back and forth. At that moment, Evan mustered all his strength to resist the urge to run to her and beg for forgiveness. To avoid disturbing her, he fled in disgrace. The second time he saw Sherry was 3 years later. At that time, his company was in trouble. Seeking funds, he was running everywhere. Passing by the billboard at Times Square, he saw her jewelry ad. She was a designer with both business acumen and artistic talent. In these years, his career had stagnated while she had left him far behind. Evan saw Sherry standing under the billboard, wearing a bright red dress. Maybe for some business event, she was posing with reporters. She looked stunning, and he looked miserable, like he could never catch up to her again. Evan silently watched, his eyes turning red. The third time he saw Sherry was at an amusement park. The sun shone brightly that day. Jack held their daughter's hand with one hand, holding an umbrella over Sherry with the other. All 3 wore cute matching outfits. The little girl laughed joyfully, first calling Jack Uncle Jack, but then, for some reason, she suddenly changed, calling him Dad. Jack seemed stunned, repeatedly confirming, "Zoe, what did you call me? Can you call me that a few more times?" Quickly, the little girl was a bit shy, but with Sherry's encouragement, she happily hugged Jack. "I'm calling you Dad." "Why, don't you want to be my dad?" and still want to be my Uncle Jack. Jack, it seemed, was so happy he could cry, and Evan was standing far away in an unnoticed corner, watching this scene with jealousy. At that time, his company had already gone bankrupt. Bella was like a cancer, torturing him to the point of wishing he were dead. He was so jealous that Jack got Sherry. He regretted even more. If he hadn't given in to temptation back then, it would be him holding Sherry's hand now. They would have kids, and wear matching family outfits. If only there was a time machine in the world, then he could travel back to before he hurt Sherry. She would still be his sweetheart. But unfortunately, all of this was just a pipe dream. Bella came to bother him again. This time, during the quarrel, Bella threw his old phone out of the window from the 10-something floor. The phone shattered into pieces. Evan completely lost it. That phone had Sherry's old voice messages. All these years, he never had the heart to delete them. During every sleepless night, he relied on those voices to poison himself, but Bella destroyed it. In that moment, his sanity was completely devoured. He pushed Bella out. "Go to hell," he said to Bella, and to himself, as the body arched through the air. In that moment of falling, the howling wind passed by his ears. "Sherry, if I'm not here anymore, would you think of me sometimes? Or maybe, it's better to forget."